of December 22nd. Present, we have Jon Berstrom and Rod Vag and myself, Alexis Kampala. Pretty low attendance due to the holidays. So we can start with a quick stand-up.
Okay, I can start. Bit more quiet than last time. I've been still focusing on redeploying parts of our stack to get the new key credentials and update, I guess, parts of the VMs. We have a bit more resource available to us now because we've taken down some stuff at Joyent. But the problem with using their Linux or their virtualization stack is that they display the same type of issues when we run tests for networking, so broadcasts and stuff. So the same issues as what we had with the free BSD jails. So it's not very suitable for running the test suite at the moment, but we can still use it for other stuff such as linting and even release baking, I guess. So that's something we can use if we need to shuffle stuff back and forth. I've also been working with looking at redeploying our PPC stack because you know we have a set of resources available to us, but it's currently fully consumed. So I just wanted to make smaller instances so we can have increased parallelism and perhaps do some more testing there. I've also been fighting recently with the PPC slaves because they've been having issues regarding connectivity, and to be honest, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I think it's network related issues. I've also I've started working on the new version of our GitHub poller that checks both Jenkins and GitHub for what's going on in terms of what's being built and updating GitHub. It's kind of off the build group agenda, but hopefully we can make it part of that once it finishes up. Yeah, and then I'm also working on the bigger Ansible refactor, which will be done somewhere in January, February, and it will also require Ansible 2.0. So I'm kind of waiting for that to be released. There's a lot of modules in there that are pretty great for us, for managing IP tables or being able to decentralized usage of package managers and stuff. So it's a lot of neat stuff in there that makes our scripts look better. So when that's out, hopefully we'll have a slightly refactored Ansible setup. So that's me.
Okay, I didn't do very much related to build. I was at Node.js Interactive. I know Joao looked at rebooting Jenkins slaves after each run, but it's not as trivial as we hoped it would be. So when you do that, the slave disconnects if you do it during the build, so the build fails, and there's no easy way to do it as a post-build task because the post-build tasks run on master. So we're still investigating. The hope was that rebooting slaves would eliminate all those issues that are due to dangling processes. Probably it looked like low-hanging fruit for solidifying our infrastructure, but still work in progress. Not much else. Rod?
So yeah, certainly not as much as Johan had to report, but I've been chasing up log files for Node.js.org to do some analysis, and I now have logs going back to May 2014. We have an unfortunate gap in the logs in September from this year due to a configuration problem on our end. That was when we first took over hosting the domain. But aside from that, we've got good log details, and I've done some basic analysis on that, and I haven't shared it with you yet, Alexis, but I'll do that because I think you were interested in looking at some numbers, particularly Windows numbers.
Yeah, definitely was interested in a platform breakdown. We should somehow try to make those statistics available.
Yes, so I've got an automatic task happening that can run the analysis and produce some anonymized logs and some summarized data files. And I was going to propose to the TSC that we publicize those. It's fairly raw data, but it would give people the opportunity to create their own visualizations or mashups with the data, and that would be an interesting thing to see happen in the ecosystem. So I'll write a proposal to publicize those. I'll try and get that done this week if I can. But yeah, so far I mean, Linux is obviously the biggest target, but Windows is by far the second biggest. OS X is actually like trivial almost, the number of downloads we get from OS X. So yeah, they're interesting numbers. I'll get you a link, Alexis, and you can have a look at that.
Yeah, we got some data from NPM on that one, and also from Joint in the past.
It's interesting how the differences between NPM numbers and Node.js.org numbers. And it's interesting to consider the reasons for those differences. But anyway, we can chat about that later.
Yeah, maybe we can open an issue on GitHub just for the tracking. Yeah, one of the things that we had differentiated before was the human downloads from the non-human downloads. Tried to differentiate desktop development downloads versus production downloads. And the pattern was drastically different. Like on the desktop, Windows was 42%, while in production, it's all Linux.
Right.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on to our agenda. So the first two issues were on Michael Dawson's plate, and he's not here.
I guess the release related part of the PPC is it's more on I think me or Rod actually because it's just setting it up. I guess we have a bigger problem now because the machines aren't even available. But once that's back and running as intended, we need to finalize the setup by adding it to our release job. So I guess the discussion would, or perhaps it isn't even a discussion, but it's just like, are we doing it and when are we doing it, and yeah. So that's, I guess, what's still to be done.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on my plate. I did have it started, I had the work started, and it shouldn't be hard to get it done. The idea was to start doing them in nightlies at least, and I just haven't got there. But Michael's been keeping up the pressure, which is good, so it'll get done.
Okay, shall we keep it as part of the meeting agenda?
We may as well, just
Just to keep updating. Okay, then the next issue where we have no updates on the options to run V8 test suite, I assume. So there are two issues that you added. One was how to include Node.js and NAN in Jenkins. So there is an issue for Node.js.
There is a shit for NAN. I think it's in the NAN repository. So NAN currently only tests on. Actually, it runs on Travis with the new OS X experimental support, so that's good, and it runs on AppVeyor as well. So it does do a bit of Windows testing, but it really would be well served from more comprehensive test suite coverage. So that's just a matter of setting up a job for that. I'm not sure what approach we want to take with Node versions.
So if you look at the Node.js issue, at the bottom of it, I suggested a few different approaches, but really, approach number one is the one that seems the most reasonable. Basically, we want to test changes in Node.js, not changes in Node, right?
Yeah.
So we would set up a job like Node test PR, but for Node.js, so it will be Node.js test PR. And the only thing is that you will want to specify which Node version you want to run it on. And we're already doing this for this serial port test job. You just give it the version of Node that you want to download, and it will download it from Node.js or.
The thing about both Node.js and actually even serial port is that most of the time you sort of want to test on like a whole lot of versions of Node, and maybe even just the actively supported. The latest of the actively supported would be enough, but maybe we should set it up so that you can, for each of these projects, when you want to run a test against a commit, it just does the latest of the active branches.
Yeah, I get your point. So to run that on multiple versions of Node.
Yeah. Yeah, for NAND that's particularly important. But it's it's the same sort of deal for all of the for Node.js and serial port. I have a makefile task actually that does some nice downloading and caching of tarballs for an internal project we have at NodeSource. Maybe I'll pull that out into a makefile that we can drop in each of the projects.
Yeah. Okay.
That might be the easiest way to do it.
Well, we have this in our queue, Joao and I. So I guess we can take this one. Since we did the work for a serial port, we can kind of expand it, like you suggested, to run on multiple versions of Node, and do the same for NAND and Node.js.
Just a quick question. Are they part of the smoke testing effort? Like NAN?
I don't think NAN is. It probably should be, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like they, I mean, at least from a topological point of view, would share the same, goals in terms of we would want to test them for multiple versions of Node, and we would probably want to do it, semi-nightly to pick up changes. But I guess that's more from the Node perspective than it is from the NAND perspective. So, yeah.
Yes, that's to test Node, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that Node changes don't break NAND and Node.js.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Which we would add as test to Node test commit, like different types of tests. Yeah, those would also be valuable, but I don't think these requests were about that.
Yeah. I guess we should do both then. That's the simple answer. Are we taking notes, by the way, somewhere?
I'm trying.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll get started with the Node.js and NAND test, and then we can open an issue about adding Node.js and NAND test to Node test commit. Okay, next issue is Rod, I've been pondering our ARM hardware and would like to discuss how we might go about ensuring that we have hardware test coverage that is as close as possible to what is being used in the wild for Node, for IoT, hobbies, etc. What's your point?
Yeah, so that was prompted by the Pi Zero release. There's a lot of platforms out there. I was talking to Michael yesterday. He gave me a list of. Apparently, Rick Waldron's been compiling a list of all the different IoT platforms that we're supported on, which is quite comprehensive for the big ones out there. But we there's enough variation in the actual hardware of these things that it might be worth considering adding more platforms that we regularly test, regularly put through our CI. But we just don't have any information on what's popular. It's just all guesses.
Would the logs give us any insight?
I don't think so, because people don't download things from these devices. They put them onto the devices. Well, we do have details on architecture, but that's just ARMv6, ARMv7, and ARMv8. So I'm just. This was actually just a thought that we could punt over to the hardware working group and get them to provide us with feedback on, with data. I don't know. They can run polls, or I don't know. Maybe they have information elsewhere. I just want to make sure that we, because I think this will be more important going into 2016. This is going to become a really important theme for Node, and I want to make sure that we have really solid support for these devices.
How else could we address it? What about adding some telemetry?
To Node itself?
Yeah, that would be the only way.
Not sure that would go down very well.
Right. It's just an idea, I guess.
Yeah, I think the problem would be that a lot of the people that compiles Node for these devices or other scenarios would just patch that out based on their own use cases. In terms of not always having internet available or whatever it might be. I think the tricky part here is also what are we looking to test? Is it hello world, or do we actually want to look at running our test suite and stuff? I mean, I've been playing around with the Tesla 2, and it's just unrealistic at best to actually run the test suite. So there's we need to figure out what support means. When can we call it a supported device, and is there a hardware requirement we would be interested in suggesting or recommending? It feels like the person or the group that drives this needs it's a lot about just building those relationships with all the providers as well, and improving that communication so we can look at getting patches back as well. I think that's at least one thing I identified when I started playing around with the Tesla 2.
Right. So yeah, but the original issue was about not having a channel to know which platforms are popular, right? So short of adding telemetry, we just have to ask people, create polls, as Ron suggested, would be a start. Okay, we can open an issue about this and CC the hardware working group and see if they have any better ideas.
How about we just open an issue on the hardware working group and just leave it with them, try and make them responsible for it.
Do they have their own repo?
Yeah. I haven't seen any activity from them recently, but this would be a good thing for them to focus on.
Okay. Resolved.
I'll open up yet another tab to do this.
Yeah, we'll follow up to the notes and collect all the to-dos after the meeting. Okay, another point I wanted to bring up for discussion is getting resources for OS X.
Oh yeah.
So obviously this is a challenging one. We run most of our hardware through donations, but I don't think we have many donations of OS X, and it needs to be physical hardware, so it's less likely to be donated, I guess.
Well, it's not necessarily that. I think we could probably, if we wanted to get donations for this, we could probably make that happen. The big problem is hosting. That is trusted, available, and everything we need it to be. That's the real big barrier. And we really actually do need donations for that, or we have to buy, one of these OS X Pass things. No, not Pass, infrastructure as a service things.
What about your garage as a hosting solution?
It's just. I mean, this has been raised before that it's a single point of failure. I'm not always here. Sometimes I go away, and what happens then?
Yes.
Johan and I discussed we could do it distributed, so he could have one in his office, and I could have one in mine, and that gives us multiple redundancy. But it's still not ideal. It'd be nice to have it at a company that had, solid network and could deal with the operational issues, just like Voxer was.
Right. So how about we assess the resources that we need and what we would like, and then we try to get the community to donate these resources, and if not, we ask the foundation to pay for it, basically.
I think what we need is details on what we need from a host, because we may get individuals saying, yeah, I'll host one in my house, but there's a trust problem there. So we need to I don't even know how to quantify this. Who would qualify as being a good host for these things? A big company? Do you have to be a big company? A trusted company, or somebody that we know? I don't know how to quantify that.
Yeah, my choice would be if we could find a virtualized provider. There's not a whole lot of them. I think you just get the colo stuff, right?
It's all colo, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just I think just the management is the bigger question here. I mean, trust is obviously there as well, but assuming we have a static IP and that we could redeploy pretty quickly if there's something that needs to be done, and we could still do releases from our own more trusted stuff. So for me, trust is perhaps not primary but secondary. I would say just knowing that someone is there if something goes wrong, or if we need to reboot it physically or whatever, really would be the number one request from my side.
So you said there are some virtualization providers out there?
Not virtualization. I don't think you're even allowed to do that with OS X against the licensing.
Oh.
Maybe. Actually, I know you can do it if you do it within OS X, I think.
Yeah, you can virtualize OS X on OS X, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if there are any providers that will provide virtual machines based on that. I guess we'll have to do a little bit of research.
So I just hang on a second. One of our guys did some research on the colo providers recently, and I think he narrowed it down to two that are worth considering. Just let me look at this. He suggested Oh, he actually he narrowed it down to one. So macminicolo.net, $65 a month, plus initial outlay for the Mac Minis. We could. I mean, this is not a huge spend for the foundation. If we want to go that way, it's not a big deal. And I think the foundation would be happy to start paying for some infrastructure stuff, just so that they can feel more useful than just paying for marketing.
Right. OSX would be the first candidate, the best candidate for this.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the others are let's get donations, but there's no real obvious path for OSX.
So this is co-location. We buy the hardware, ship it, and then they manage it, right?
No, I think it's renting. So you pay an extra fee on top of hosting for renting the server.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they provide the hardware, they install it, they rent it.
At least from the research I've done, both of the options are available. So you can either buy one and ship it over somewhere, or you can rent it from them.
Right. Yeah, that's what it says here. Yeah.
Right.
And we'd want redundancy too, so we really need more than just one.
Yeah.
So okay, I guess it's worth an experiment, at least. Can we assess how much?
We kind of need to extend the versions of OS X we're testing. We're just doing 10.10 now, right, Rod?
Yes, just 10.10. So we need 10.11, but if we can get images for older versions, then that'd be great. But I just didn't have images available.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a few issues, like on 10.7 and 10.8, we just don't pick up because we don't test it. It's just one of those things that would be so visible if we just had it available. So it's definitely something we should try and figure out how to make less painful to set up.
Okay, so I propose we open an issue, we list the platform needs, and prioritize them. And then
the other option, actually, I've just found the other option that our guy narrowed down. It's Mac Stadium. They're a little bit more expensive, but they have more options. So you can just choose the setup of the machine you want to buy as well. Oh, and you can select different operating systems all the way back to 10.7. That's interesting.
so is it going to be complicated to get the foundation to pay for this, or do we have a credit card?
Oh, I'd probably have to go through a board meeting. It's one happening in January. It wouldn't be, I don't think. And it's really not a big spend.
Okay.
We should try and narrow it down to a few providers and perhaps just reach out and see if we can, reach some kind of agreement. Yeah,
let's assess the hardware needs that we have, and let's take a look at these providers, put it on GitHub, and bring it up to the next foundation board meeting so that we can run an experiment at least. Sounds good.
Let's do it.
I take it as a yes. Okay, then the other two issues I was suggesting were about Jenkins, and the first one is about cutting our old builds of Jenkins so that we can fix some issues. Sometimes we run into bugs that seem really trivial to fix, but for some reason they don't get fixed in Jenkins for months. So it would be nice to be able to make those fixes ourselves and then upstream the patch to Jenkins. And also, since a group of people in our organization are kind of fed up with Jenkins and they want to make some more drastic changes to it, I think one approach could be to learn more about the Jenkins code base and and take that as a starting point rather than starting from scratch. We might be able to replace parts of it, eventually morph it even into a Node.js solution. But just to get our feet wet, I think the first step would be to fork it, build it, and install our own builds.
So out of interest, what are the top things from your perspective that we would start fixing or changing?
Well, there are a couple of bugs. Aside from those, there are things that are just difficult to do. Like we're trying to reboot slaves right now, programmatically from a job at the end of a job, so that no node instances are left dangling. And this is extremely difficult to do. Like the system wasn't designed to do this, right? This is just an example of how we could improve it. Basically, this new CI effort is starting to gather requirements, like what do we need from a CI system for Node? And I suggest that we could go about it in a different way, which is what is wrong with what we have, and let's try and fix it, which might get us there much more quickly.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through what how we would get our feet wet with that. So can we identify something that is worth tinkering with? I mean, I've got enough experience to do this with like my Java background, but it's pretty distasteful task to be honest. But is there something that is compelling enough that that we could start working on?
I'm sure we'll find plenty of compelling items.
Because a lot of the things we may want are just features, which would be plugins.
Yes. Yeah, my suggestion is that if we start getting our feet wet, then the next step in the process might look less intimidating.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I've thought about possible ways of attaching Node to Jenkins to make the migration path to our own CI easier.
Exactly. Like we could, but once we learn more about the code, we could maybe add the feature to have scripts in Node.js, right? Instead of Bash scripts, or maybe rewrite parts of it in Node.
Yeah.
I still think that's better than starting from scratch.
No, I agree. It's not. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think this discussion is kind of borderline between our group and the new CI group, and I can only assume that most people that would join the CI group would be very interested in actually rebuilding something from scratch in JavaScript or Node pure. But if we could perhaps add some, structure to how it should be built, we could start splitting it up. I've been doing a lot of playing around with a library in Python that that communicates with Jenkins. It does something in between of using the API, the JSON API, but also just pure REST to do, for instance, node management isn't available over the API, Jenkins API. A lot of job tasks isn't available through Jenkins API. Jenkins API is pretty limited in terms of what it can offer. So I think creating a library in JavaScript that would do pretty much the same thing would at least make it simpler for us to create a process that would delegate work or something similar. So yeah, but again, I think a first meeting or some kind of similar effort in the CI group would probably be more suitable for this discussion. And my thoughts on the forking Jenkins is more I really I'm really hoping for upstream to be more responsive if we want to start tinker around and fix bugs. Carrying Jenkins in the long run is something that is probably more of a burden to merge all the upstream stuff and when we have security related issues. So if we can avoid it, that would be preferable from my end.
Yeah, definitely upstreaming changes will be the goal. Like the goal is not to create a hard fork, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Your point about getting our feet wet so that we can understand it better, I think, is the important one here. Because while I share the goal of doing something from scratch in Node, I'm also afraid that the task is too big, that unless somebody dedicates a whole lot of time to it to get the thing bootstrapped, it's just not going to happen. I started it a while back, but it's just such a big task, and the longer we go with Jenkins, the more embedded we get with it, because we're using more and more advanced features, and the complexity of our CI is going up, and then the more difficult it will be to replicate that with a from scratch effort. That's all.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
I don't see anyone stepping up to start that work either.
I completely agree with you. I mean, there are several person years that went into Jenkins, right? So it would take a considerable amount of resources, and it's very unlikely that it will happen.
Yeah, I mean, once it got started and people were, it was usable in a basic way, I think we'd get momentum, but it's got to get started, and that kind of thing tends to take an individual doing a huge effort to bootstrap. It's very difficult to bootstrap these things as a committee. And I don't see that happening. I don't see it happening as a committee, and I don't see it happening with any individual stepping up. So it's just going to be a pie in the sky for a while.
Also, as you bootstrap it, I mean, it will be far from perfect. I mean, one of the things I know from experience with these systems is that, okay, the system might be frustrating. It's got a lot of issues, but also parts of it is how we use it, how we write the script, right? And those issues it's going to take a long time before a new system becomes more reliable than this, basically. So if we identify the reliability issues, I think we made already very good progress with the disconnects and the master performance. I think we are not too far from having a reliable system by fixing what we have. Once that happens, then the motivation to start from scratch will probably even vanish.
Maybe. We're still dealing with a big Java beast, and that's always going to be frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like a lot of the issues we are encountering are like fundamental problems to the platforms. I mean, if you just look at the issue we're having right now with the reconnect problems from our PowerPC stuff, it's like I have no clue where to look. Like, it's not like a traceback is ever going to help you. And I mean, the slave says it's connected. The server doesn't say anything. It's like, where do you go? What do you do? It's very hard to solve these kinds of problems because it's just so complex and big.
Okay, so I guess the solution is just to get our feet wet, start experimenting with a build and installing it, and maybe a fix or two.
And also Johan's point of a Node library that can start interacting with Jenkins from the outside might be another way to do it. And maybe both of those efforts are the same thing. Maybe extending Jenkins so that we can have a more sophisticated Node library that we can use would help. So there's possibly similarities in these suggestions, but bootstrapping is the big thing. How do we bootstrap the effort of starting a new thing? And starting from Jenkins is probably not a bad idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the trickiest part of the like clean separation of the different parts of Jenkins is that the job definition phase is pretty brittle. I mean, we all sit with the Jenkins admin and click around and edit text boxes to get it to do what we want, and it's obviously one of the strengths that makes the iteration of fixing a job or creating a new job so quick. But like when it comes to the definition phase of how do we tell a Node.js slave what to do from a Jenkins instance will make it very hard. So I mean, I've been looking a lot at how the build-bot structure works, and it's just very, very different and more formalized and cleanly isolated in terms of, you know, this thing does that, and the master is responsible for this, but again, that doesn't really help this in any other way than, and you know, like being inspired perhaps by it when we look at creating our own stuff. But it's just so I don't see, like, you know, how we can get a Node.js slave talking to a Jenkins master as a job runner anytime, you know, in the near future. So I think that, yeah, it's just an interesting problem to solve from a CI perspective, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be happy with just setting up the build and fixing one bug and then re-discussing it from there.
Oh yeah, before I forget, while we're still talking about Jenkins, there was like a small security issue, but it was 4 security-related issues in a release that came out, I think it's 2 weeks ago now. I didn't create an issue about it in our repo, but I created an issue tied to it in the security group. But there was nothing that, you know, affected us, and I also think us firewalling, you know, the JNI protocol, so what IPs we allow to talk to the master, will really shield us from further similar issues, because it seems like the JNI protocol is really, or JNLP or whatever it's called, is a big problem from a security point of view.
Okay, shall we move to the last issue then? Setting up Jenkins secondary masters.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, one of the things that we have been doing is doing upgrades in place of Jenkins. And sometimes we don't know what kind of bugs the new versions introduce, and then we are left with a lot of grief. So obviously, we're running a service here that we want to be highly available. It would be much better to test these upgrades in a pre-production environment. So we're able to test job changes by making copies of jobs, but we're not able to test upgrades on Jenkins, upgrades of plugins. Those affect the whole system globally. So I think the best way to do that would be to have secondary master. And also we talked about this before as a way to have a backup system in case our master goes down for whatever reason. We can switch people to using a secondary master. So there could be a couple of purposes. One is for staging changes, the other one is for redundancy. So I wanted to know what is blocking us at the moment. I think the connectivity options. Rod was saying that running slave.jar, connecting the Raspberry Pis to multiple instances would not work because there's not enough RAM on those machines. Are we still using slave.jar on all those machines, or can we use the OpenSSH approach?
Yeah, that's the blocker, the main blocker, I think. If we switch to SSH as our primary mechanism, then it becomes more reasonable because we can connect to it from any master. I don't see a big problem with doing that, and it may even potentially increase reliability. I don't know, but that would be the thing we have to work on, is switching out from slave JNLP to a SSH connection thing. There may be blockers with some providers. I don't know if the IBM PPC machines. Do we need to be on a VPN or anything special for that, Johan?
No. It's not needed. It's just SSH over an IP, so nothing strange.
So on Windows, we also didn't have OpenSSH. So I think it was not Joao tried to set it up, but it was work in progress.
Right. Well, on Windows, we tend to have enough RAM to be able to run multiple slave.jars if we need to. So that's workable, I think. It's the low power machine, so it's the ARM machines really.
Okay, so we could install multiple slaves.jar on all the other ones or on the Windows ones and switch the ARM machines to OpenSSH. So from a management perspective, is that gonna make our life a nightmare to run multiple slaves.jar?
Yes, it will be annoying. Yeah.
So I guess it would be best to do it only where we cannot use OpenSSH, so probably on Windows.
I think so, and I think using SSH for running slaves may actually simplify life where we can. So getting rid of slave.jar and the Java process may actually make our slave configuration and reliability better. That's my suspicion.
Yeah. So one question is, though, if two masters were connecting to the same Raspberry Pi at the same time through OpenSSH, wouldn't then we incur in the same memory issues?
Yes, but presumably the secondary would be only for backups when the master's not working and maybe testing upgrades to Jenkins, so probably not as big a deal.
Okay, so we would have to be careful not to interfere, basically. But there is a potential of interfering.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, I guess we can cross that bridge once we get there.
Yeah.
We might find other ways to take a mutex, an exclusive lock to the machine.
Yeah.
For the duration of a job run.
Something as simple as creating a lock file that you have to check, and if it still exists, then you have to wait. And that might be enough.
Right. Okay. So I'll write some notes about this, but I guess we're gonna try to move things to OpenSSH as much as possible and try to set up an additional master.
Just a quick question: is there any awareness from a Jenkins master point of view in terms of redundancy or replication or shared storage, or is there anything there?
I haven't researched that, but I don't believe so.
Okay.
But that certainly would be something to investigate. Surely somebody out there is doing something creative. It's hard to believe that there's not an existing effort.
Yeah, I've seen best practice about having multiple masters, but I'm not sure about how they set up replication. If Jenkins provides any of that, but yeah, definitely let's do a quick research before reinventing the wheel.
So I have to go to another meeting. So are we pretty much done here?
Yes, we went through all the issues, so I guess we can conclude the meeting. So thank you for joining, and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you guys.